Hello there, and welcome to the How to Market Your Horse Business podcast. I'm so glad you're joining me here today. As you've likely guessed by now, my name is Denise Alvarez. I get to host you here each week. And before we dive into my conversation with my guest today, I'm going to briefly introduce myself just in case we're new friends. And then I promise we will jump right in. So as I said, my name is Denise, and through my business, Storm Lily Marketing, I get to help dream-chasing horse business owners ditch the marketing overwhelm so they can get the clarity they've been craving and grow their business in a way that meets their definition of success. Now, I do this primarily through business coaching as well as education, such as this podcast, and I have some online learning resources for you as well. All that I do, friends, is to help you as an equestrian entrepreneur to be out doing more of what you love to do. However it is that you're serving the equine industry, whether you're in the barn, you're in the arena, you're outside, you're inside, you're behind the lens, you're behind the camera, wherever it is that you're serving the industry, I want to help you do more of that. And so here on the podcast, you'll get a mix of step-by-step strategies, essential how-tos, and entrepreneurial mindset shifts that will help you to not only see what's possible for your business, but I'm also here to guide you through that process so you can make it happen. Now, today, I'm so pumped to bring you a guest who's going to dive into this idea of building a team and delegating. And we're going to talk about the nuances of that. And the reason it's so important for every entrepreneur to hear this conversation is because I know it is tempting to think that in order to build the successful equine business that you have dreamed up in your heart and in your mind, then if it's going to happen, you're going to have to do it by yourself, right? It's up to me. And because I know as horse people, we're get-or-dones, right? We will get the job done. And I know that because that's me too. In my coaching clients, that's them as well. But here's what I also know. In order to do it well in a way that meets your version of success, you're not going to be doing it alone. You may want a business coach. You may want someone to help you with social media. You may want somebody that's doing your website, that's helping with content, that's scheduling, handling customer and client inquiries. There's so many ways that you can bring people in to help you. Because there comes a point when delegation is going to be required if you want to continue to grow your business. Now, that doesn't always mean you have to scale or that idea that more is always more. Success is subjective. And you may tell me, Denise, I don't need to delegate. I'm just going to quit doing the things that I don't want to do. And if that's not going to hamper your business and your goals that you have for your business, by all means, go for it. But for the most part, it's going to be important for you as an entrepreneur to look at the things that you are doing on a regular basis, the things that are on your plate that are loading it down, that you could get someone else to come in and help you. And guess what? They might even do it better than you sometimes. Isn't that wild and hard to believe? You might actually not enjoy delegating because you think that it all has to be done your way or the best way, and that's only your way. And that's definitely some mindset shifts that you're going to need to tackle. And we're going to talk about that in our conversation today because I get it. You have built a brand that people trust. You've worked really hard to build a brand. And so inviting someone to come in and be a part of that and be a front-facing person that's, interacting with customers, that takes a lot of trust. I get that. And it's a very important question for you to consider as you look at growing a team or growing your team. And as you look at delegating, these are really good and necessary questions. And that's why I can't wait for you to meet Nicole Berthelot because she's going to speak some insight into that. She has a very unique perspective. For those of you in the dressage world, you might know Nicole, but you most definitely know the trainer that she works closely with in her online business, which is Amelia Newcomb. Now, I was first introduced to Amelia through my own riding instructor. Even though I was learning to jump and not training in dressage, the educational videos that Amelia provided on YouTube were so helpful to me as I was learning how to ride, quote unquote, correctly as an adult. I've always been on the back of horses, but I didn't necessarily know anything about correct rider position and proper cues and those types of things, which are important, especially for learning to jump. And so I started just consuming Amelia's content, downloading some of her resources, and then I got excited about what she's doing as a business owner and just really paying attention to her marketing. I get her emails and I followed what she's been doing from a business perspective for a while. I love how well she serves her audience, how passionate she is, and how consistent she is with her content. But we all know that in order to do things at that level, weekly YouTube videos for I forget how long. You'll hear Nicole talk about that. But in order to do it at that level and continue to write and train and compete, I knew she had to have a team behind her. And Nicole is the person that has been leading that team for a few years now. And here's what I want you to remember. If Amelia had not been delegating and building a team over the years, there is no way she would have the business that she has now. With a YouTube channel that is successful, an online learning academy, a thriving Facebook group, regular educational offerings, not to mention her own training schedule and in-person clinics. Now, I'm listing all of these things, but I want to remind you, I am not suggesting that Amelia's business model is the way to go, that it's the best or only way to operate. It works well for her and her family and her goals and objectives. And remember, success is subjective, okay? So it works well for her. So what I want you to hear in this episode and what you're going to hear from Nicole are some practical ways that you can look at what matters to you. What's your version of success and how can you delegate to help you get there, help you do more of what you love to do. So you have to know on a personal level, what does success look like for you in your equine business? And then from there, you can light up the world with the dreams that you've built in your heart for your business and how you're going to serve the industry. So I want you to listen to this conversation with Nicole with a notepad in hand. She, like me, is giving some very practical advice, loves to give practical advice. So she's going to get really specific about the different ways that you can and should delegate as a business owner. She's going to give you some cautions and questions to consider as you build your team. And then she's also going to share things that you need to remember as you are responsible as a leader of a team, as the owner of the business, and what that can look like and how you can set people up for success in your business. Because as you know, being the owner, being the leader is more than just calling the shots and telling people what to do. You want to do this well. And Nicole is going to help you to do that. She was so generous with her time and her experience and sharing that here. And I know you're going to get so much from this conversation. So grab your notepads, friends. Let's dive in. Here is my conversation with Nicole Berthelot. Okay, perfect. Nicole, thank you so much for joining me here today. I so appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. Well, as we were chatting even before, I'm personally excited to hear more about your story and how you ended up doing what you're doing now. So, if it's all right, I would love for you to take us back a little bit and share how you became what you're doing now, which is a licensed Equestrian Canada B dressage judge. You're an instructor on Amelia Newcomb's team. And essentially, we're going to put in quotes, the business manager at Amelia Newcomb Dressage, because you're wearing many, many hats, one of which is really helping manage the business side of things. But as they'll hear, you're doing a lot there. So tell us a bit about how this all came to be for you, Nicole.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's probably very similar to a lot of people's story. Horse crazy kid, starting to grow up. And one thing my parents were really adamant about was that we could do anything we wanted in our life, but we had to work for it. We had to plan for it. And my mother was adamant, you're going to go to university. So regardless of what I wanted to do with the horses, I had to get my education. And so I went and got my business degree, which was a lot of fun. And that led me to a role in actually at an equestrian clothing line. And so very cool job. I learned a ton on it. And then I went to work for an agricultural flooring company and all this other cool stuff. So I learned all these great things on the job, hands-on, in an industry that I loved. That was a ton of fun. And at the time, I was really struggling with my riding. I wasn't as good as I wanted to be. I was not doing great. I had taught during college to for beer money. I coached some of the little kids at the local barn. But I was really struggling. I wasn't the rider I wanted to be. And so I thought to myself, I want to be in this industry. I enjoy working in the industry. But I think, maybe if I got some education, I could maybe judge, and maybe that's what I would do. That would be my thing. I could give back to the community, work and be that element rather than participating in the shows. Maybe I judge the shows, right?
Okay.
And that actually took me, it's a long process that we won't get into getting certified to be a judge, but a lot of education. And in the end, what it's happened, and I'm still learning as I go too, because there's a long way to go in the judging process, is my riding has actually gotten a lot better. And I'm actually at a much better place. Now I've done some of the FEI tests and I've trained a few horses, and I'm very happy with where I am with my riding, even though I'm not per se a coach or a trainer in that sense of the word. And after COVID hit, I was, I went and I did a horse job during COVID because everything shut down. I got laid off, as many people do. And I came out of the pandemic and I was like, man, I've got all these great skills to help small to medium sized businesses grow their companies. I had done a lot of different things in the work that I had been doing. And I was like, wow, I'd really like to help more of these agricultural businesses expand. Um, but I didn't want to work for an agency. I didn't want to start an agency. I was like, I don't, that, you obviously do that and it's wonderful for you and it's very successful. But it's not my cup of tea. And so I started helping people locally teach. I did a lot of consulting and teaching. And so it was in the sense of like, people would come to me and say, I need to grow my business. Can you teach me how to do social media? Which seems very rudimentary. And I'm like, well, sure, but like you actually need to do X, Y, and Z as well. And I would show them the bigger process. It's not just about putting a few things up on a post. You have to develop your brand kit. You have to learn your voice. Who's your ideal customer? Find out these things. And that was good and fun. And then Amelia, I was part of her community online, as so many of us are. She fosters a wonderful community and for both paid and non-paid students alike. And so I saw that she was looking for a project manager, just 10, 15 hours a week. And I thought, how much time could the woman actually need for her online business? But this would be a great way for me to have some steady work. And I met with her. We really clicked. She really liked the fact that I was a judge and a writer, as well as I had the business sense and the wherewithal with the project management. And so she's like, I'd like you to come on. And then from there, it kind of just blossomed. She's now the biggest client that I work with, even though I do little projects here and there. And it's wonderful work, very rewarding. Her whole business is focused around dressage for all. And no matter where you are in the world, what horse you ride, what saddle you ride, what age you are, what you've done in your life, you can learn dressage and enjoy it, and it can help you have this better communication and riding experience. And that's a wonderful thing to be a part of. And so as I was saying before the call, we're just coming up on 4 years now. And, as I said, I started out doing some project management work for her, and then she's like, oh, you can proofread my work and look at my videos and have another set of eyes on things. And then I started helping in the courses and developing some content, and then we expanded the team and I started managing some of the other projects, and the girls within the team, or young women I should say, within the team, and giving them more direction. And now, as you mentioned, quote unquote business manager, because I don't like the term, because I don't run Amelia's business. Amelia runs her own business, but I support her within that, and I help her develop systems and processes and new ideas. She referred to me as an entrepreneur the other day, and I was like, oh yeah, I like that. She's the entrepreneur and I'm the entrepreneur, which
Yeah.
I quite like. And that's kind of how I came here. And, it's been a wonderful journey. I really enjoy what I do. It's very rewarding, and I can't wait to talk more about it.
Okay, that's so fun. So backing up, dressage has always been your sport of choice, or no?
Not quite. I dabbled in eventing when I was
Okay.
12.
Uh-huh.
I did Smurf level eventing, which is like the 1 foot. But pretty much I chickened out. I had a few really bad falls. And then I was like, I'm going to be a dressage rider. And then I was terrible at dressage for a number of years before I learned what actually dressage was.
Okay, awesome. I love that. I think it's so good for people to know. And I know we jumped in head first, but for listeners who are listening and are not in that world, and don't get on YouTube a ton, because if you get on YouTube and look up very many things about horses, I will tell you Amelia's channel is what's going to come up, because she has such a library of content. But for those who don't know that yet, will you quickly just give us an overview of Amelia's business model and the education components, and let's not forget the fact that she still competes. Like, for those that are listening and think you can only do one thing, she's doing multiple. But can you give us a quick overview of what her business model looks like?
Yeah, for sure. So she is a Grand Prix rider and trainer based in Somas, California, and she starts a lot of her own young horses. She enjoys the process of bringing them up the levels, and she has an in-person training business as well. And we were, I think it's been 7 years now. Her and her brother, who her brother is also a dressage rider, they had this little competition, like friendly bet, like, oh, who wonder who can get more like subscribers on YouTube? Like, let's make these fun little videos. And just every week she like released a new video and like wrote a new email. And then people were really enjoying her style and the way she taught, because it was a lot of like, I see a lot of this. And if this is happening to you, here's how you fix it. So it wasn't these like perfect rides. It was, she was really
Yeah.
saying, and she was showing the mistakes. And it's funny, sometimes even now she'll be like, oops, that transition wasn't very good. I better redo that. So there's not a lot of cutting in her videos. It's very real and very raw, and she just enjoys teaching. And so all of a sudden, she had this big following. And then during the pandemic, when all the barns shut down, people still wanted to learn. And she's like, I need to support my clients somehow. So she started teaching webinars, and there's a lot of work going into the webinars. And all of a sudden, hundreds of people were coming to the webinars. And she's like, I think I should put this like in a course. Like, maybe I can get, some like investment back on like the hours I've spent doing all these slides.
Right.
And then it just kind of grew from there. And so she has a lot in her programs and a lot in her platform. There's 3 sort of tiers. There's the free content. There's content that's always going to be free. She does a weekly free video on YouTube every single week. You can subscribe to her email and you'll get directly into your inbox. She's got a ton of free mini courses. And then she's got programs that are like one-off programs. You can buy a workshop on how to do the half fault, or how to do the leg yield and things like that. And they usually include a lecture and 4 or 5 exercises to work on. And then she does bigger masterclass programs with live office hours where she'll review your video, or someone from the team like me will review the video and give you more feedback. And those are usually for like a set 8 or 12 weeks. And so it really helps people because they can pick and choose what they want based on what their life is doing at the moment, if they're busy, if they're not busy, if they're financially able to do it or not, if their horse is sound or not, and they can still continue to learn and enjoy. And for riders who are, for lack of a better word, in the middle of nowhere, it's been really incredibly helpful. And we get riders from South Africa and Qatar and like all of these places. I'm like, oh my God, you have cell service? Like, what are you like? And you choose to come here? That's so cool. And it was interesting when I first started working with her. I was kind of like, yeah, you sell courses online. I'm sure it works, quote unquote. And all of a sudden, I was in these programs watching these students, watching their videos week after week. And by the 3rd week of an 8-week or 12-week program, I'm like, I can see a huge difference. And these riders are taking the exercises, taking the work and the feedback, and having these amazing transformations because they're so hungry to learn. And she's providing that avenue to do it because they don't live in a place, or they don't have access to a coach, or
Mhm.
whatever it is. And it's wonderful. We get people in the courses. I get emotional because she's so good at what she does and she let me into it. But we get women, on the graduation calls after our program, and they're bawling. They say things like, I was going to give up on my horses. I'm going to stop riding. You've given me back the joy of riding. I thought I couldn't do this anymore. I could never believe I could go to a show. I never thought I would canter. I never thought I would do this. And she's really changing lives and changing the horses' lives. And sorry, I get emotional with it because it is so powerful. And we went to World Cup to see World Cup when I was in Omaha, and we literally walked in the building, and we were in the entranceway of the building for 45 minutes because people just kept stopping her and holding her hand and going, "You've changed my life. You've given me back my horse. I don't know how to thank you." And it's a wonderful thing to be a part of. And it is a business for sure, but it's a passion business. And she works incredibly hard, and she has an incredible sense of responsibility to these women and to these riders. I shouldn't just say women, it's men as well. onto these horses. And I remember, I think it was last year, the year before, she was competing and doing a few CDIs, and we were launching a program, and a lot was going on. And I said to her, I said, listen, like, I think you need to take a step back. Like, do you want to pause doing this course coming up? Do you want to maybe take a month off doing videos? I think you need to, we need to change something, because we're going to burn you out.
Yeah.
And she looked at me and she said, how could I stop? I said, when she knows, she said something like, when I know people look to me for help and I'm making such a difference for them, why would I stop? How could I even stop? And so instead we hired and delegated and got more people in the team, which I know we're going to talk about today. And so, and it works, and it works because she works. And she's incredibly good at what she does, and I'm glad to be a part of it and to help her. And I know that's a little bit of a lot of a story, but she's an
No, I love it.
incredible horsewoman and an incredible businesswoman as well.
It's so good. It gives listeners a great idea of the business model, but also of something I talk about often on the podcast, which is staying connected to your why. And so when she gets to have those in-person conversations, or she gets to have those calls at the end, then the original why was something fun, clearly, which I love that I didn't know that part of the story, that's how the YouTube channel started. But it quickly went deeper than that. And so even though honestly her tagline is dressage for all, I can even hear that the heart goes deeper than that, in terms of, yes, it's dressage, but the reason, right? Like there's a deeper why even behind that. And there's a deeper why behind your passion behind it. And so I love that. And what's also important for people to hear is that even though you're not the founder of Amelia Newcomb Dressage and all of the education she's doing, because she's staying connected to that strong why and keeping her team connected, like you have similar passion. It may not be the same founder passion. The founder is always going to be a little bit deeper, but I think it's important for people to see and hear and understand that it's possible and important for you as a founder to help your team stay connected to the why, and to know the importance of what they're doing is not just a bottom line. Like so many founders forget to instill that in their team, and then the team thinks it's just to make the bottom dollar, right? It's just about making money, and it's so much deeper than that. And when the entire team knows it's deeper than that, the outcome on the other side is just completely different. It's more powerful, it's more impactful, and people can tell the difference of that authenticity. So I love it. I think it's very important for people to hear and understand that as they're building their businesses. And so as we talked, you are in a unique position because you're not necessarily the founder here. While you do have your own business, when we're talking about the Amelia Newcomb side of things, you're helping to build her business essentially. And so I would love, you mentioned this in your story there about this idea of delegating. And so even when Amelia was hiring for a project manager years ago, she clearly was at a point where she knew that in order to keep doing what she loved doing, in order to help more riders and help more horses, she needed to bring some team members on board. And this is an area that a lot of business owners get stuck in, where they feel like they have to do it all if it's going to be done well. And so they're scared to delegate. They're scared to build a team. Maybe they don't feel like they could be the leader that they need to be. Maybe they don't feel like they set out to do that. But the reality is, all of the things that you just told us that Amelia is doing in her business would not be possible if she wasn't willing to delegate and to build a team. It's just literally not feasible that she could do that. So talk to me a little bit more about the need for entrepreneurs in the equestrian space to recognize the power of delegation and the need for it.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. It's an amazing business that she's built, but you can't do it alone. And it's the same thing about going to the Olympics or raising a child. It takes a village, it takes a team. And the reality is because we have finite amount of time. We only have 24 hours in a day. But the good thing is we all have the same 24 hours in a day. And, I see a lot of entrepreneurs, and especially the horse industry, where people get burned by their first hire or their second hire, or they aren't structuring it correctly. And then the delegation falls apart, and then it creates more work. And that's can sometimes also be a part of that hesitancy to grow because, like you said, it isn't getting done correctly or not to the standard that they want. And I often find it's things, they're not delegating the right things or the right way. And a phrase that I took it from an ex-boyfriend, was the expression getting off the tools, which is, he was a carpenter. And so it's a phrase that they use in the trade industry from when you go from like a one-man team, you're doing some little contracting work, whether you're a plumber, electrician, whatever, And then, you want to build a bigger business to take on bigger contracts, but you have to transition into getting off your tools and getting into a blue collar job. And the idea of it is then in the long term, excuse me, in the long term, you'll have more time, hopefully more income coming in, and you'll have a better work-life balance, and eventually your business will run itself, quote unquote, as much as it can. But the difficulty for equestrian entrepreneurs is that we love our jobs. We love our horses. We don't want to give up our tools. We got into the industry because we want to ride more, because we want to spend more time with our horses. And they feel like, well, why would I want to get off of this? But the reality is you have to. There comes a point, if you want to scale your business, if you want to have more flexibility, if you want to have more consistent income, you have to take a step back, delegate the things that are not essential or that are good, someone else can do better. And then you can invest that time to make your business better. And then long term, you'll be spending more time in the saddle and other people will be doing all of the elements of the business that you don't enjoy. But it's not a short-term thing. Getting off the tools can take years to do and set up the processes and systems in place to work effectively. But the good thing is it can be done. You just need to have a few strategies in place to do it correctly.
Yeah, that's so good. Okay, I want you to talk about, we were talking about this before we got on the call, this idea that some people have that. So it's funny, we have two spectrums always, right? Everything's polar opposite. So you have some entrepreneurs who are like, I just want to build this thing that'll just run on its own so I can just go ride and do whatever I want. And then you have other entrepreneurs who are like, I want to build this thing up, but I need to control every single aspect of it. And so I'm not going to enjoy it because it's never going to give me freedom because I'm always going to be in it 100%. So we've talked to those people, like you need to delegate and you need to figure out the things that are not essential, the things that you don't enjoy, the things that not only you can do, and hand those off. But talk to me about the people who are saying, okay, I just need somebody to come in and run the show for me, right? I'm going to hire a business manager so they can do all the things I hate so I can just go ride. But that's not necessarily how it works either. Talk to us about that.
No, and that's not how it works in any of the industries, unfortunately. And first off, a lot of us don't have the money to just hire someone off the bat to do that. So we're limited by financial resources on that. But also, no one knows your business better than you. And you'll find this working with certain agencies that don't do proper onboarding, or if you hire someone to run your business, run the show, they don't understand they might not understand the why. They might not know the customer avatar because they haven't been in it for the last 5 years like you have been. And so if you bring someone on to run the show, they can't make the same decisions and management decisions that you would because they don't know the ins and outs of your business. And so you can get to a point where you can have a business manager, but it's taking the time to get off those tools. And, you have to put the processes in place. You have to build your business from the inside out and build all the things that those big corporations and bigger businesses have. Do they have a structure? Do they have a brand book? Do they have customer avatars? Whatever, do they have funnels? Whatever all those systems are in place, you have to build those so that when you take a step back, your company and your team has a place to look for those answers. And unless you do that work beforehand, it will never work. And a lot of times with entrepreneurs is it's all in their head, right? And so you have to take the time to do that and to get there so that someone else can come step in. And what's great about Amelia and I is now that it's been 4 years and she did a lot of work before me. And then I said, okay, we need to put a few more processes in place. Let's get this organized. A big one that I advocated for was the brand book because we didn't have a brand book. So we didn't have brand colors and fonts. And so I was like, okay, first things first, let's get this done. And now we're at a point where she can take a week off to go to Europe to try horses, or to very rarely go on vacation with her husband. And the business runs because I was a part of that process. She did a lot of the work. I know her process. I know what she likes and doesn't like. And I can make decisions, fairly educated and usually right decisions, because I know what her brand is and her business is. And if you don't do that work beforehand, no matter who you hire as a brand manager, will never be able to be successful, not because they're not a good brand or business manager, but because they don't have the tools to help them make those decisions.
That is so good. It's on you as the founder, as the entrepreneur to set those team members up for success. So, therefore, Nicole, tell us some of the very practical things. As the person on the receiving end of delegation, you have a unique view. So oftentimes, like I said, the entrepreneur is sitting in the seat, and that's so good to hear their perspective. But I also think there's something really unique about getting to hear from somebody who's saying, look, I received this, I created the processes, I saw the gaps, I received processes. From your perspective, what are some tips or strategies or practical ideas that my listeners can take as they look for ways that they can intentionally delegate, perhaps hire a business manager, perhaps hire someone that's social media? But even if they're hiring someone that's social media, I always caution people with the same things that you said. You can hire somebody to do your social media, but if you're not clear on your why, if you're not clear on your purpose, if you're not clear on your audience, they can't get the results that you want because you haven't given them good information. So, same thing in this case. So tell us a little bit about what my listeners should know and or practical ways they can do this.
Yeah, I've got a few things written down because I didn't want to forget anything. And like you said, I'm a little bit unique because I do get things delegated to me. And then also now Amelia's team is big enough that I also delegate out. So it's a kind of an interesting place to be. The biggest thing that I find is that entrepreneurs don't realize that there's different kinds of delegation. Right. So a typical one is like burnout delegation. For example, I'm going to hire someone to clean stalls on Saturday so that I can have a day off so I don't burn out. I can regenerate myself, right? Which is great, which is totally valid. You do need to have time off and your business needs to be able to run without you there, right? The next one is direct income delegation. So perhaps I'm going to hire another instructor so I can make more money because then we can have two lessons going at once and we'll earn double the income, quote unquote, because you still pay the other person. But essentially, whoever you delegated a task to, they're paying for themselves. So they're not costing you, quote unquote, any money. And then the next one is investment delegation, which is I am going to pay somebody to do a task, and I am going to go then spend my time doing something that builds my business forward. And that is the one that you need to be really focusing on. That is what's going to make your business work for you, because all of those advanced systems, funnels, processes, things like that only you have in your head, or maybe you still need to work on, you need to free up time in your daily grind of daily and urgent things to do to create those long-term strategies that are important, but they're not urgent that they get done today. And that's where you need to spend a lot of your time, especially as an entrepreneur starting out. You need to figure out how to delegate tasks to free up 2, 5, sometimes 10 hours a week to do those things. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in your business either. You can do it in your house and things like that. Maybe you hire a house cleaner or you pay for meals, like a meal prep service, and that saves you a couple hours a week, and you can invest that in yourself. And it doesn't have to be you working hard per se. It could be you listening to a podcast. It could be you taking a clinic or an online course, whatever it is, but it's investing in you so you can make your business better. And that's, I think, the number one thing that Amelia does really, really well is that she invests an insane amount of time in herself, her own education, not just as a rider and a teacher, but also as a businesswoman. It's crazy. Sometimes I'm like, oh, did you see this? And she'll be like, yeah, I read that book last week. Or like, she'll be like, oh, did you hear this podcast? And like, she's all over it. And she spends a lot of time looking at other industries, listening to industry professionals, learning and investing in herself. So that way she can come back with projects, with plans, with ideas, with processes, and then it makes her business work more. And I think as an entrepreneur, when you're first starting out, having that percentage is really hard to figure out of which one you need more of, because oftentimes, especially in the horse industry, we need someone just to cover burnout. But if we don't do the investment delegation, then we can't grow our business and scale our business. I hope that clarifies those different types of delegation.
That was so good. I have never heard someone break it down that way. But I think that was really beneficial. So yes, thank you for doing that. That makes perfect sense. And I think it's important to hear because sometimes we know it, but then the doing is hard. But I think this is why it's so good to learn from others who are in your sphere, because it's so good to hear for my listeners, for them to hear that someone who's still competing, who's still training, who's doing those things, and is growing a sustainable business on the online education side, and the way that she's been able to do that, and the way that she looks at delegation is not just like she didn't hire just more educators, right? It sounds like she intentionally chose her hires in a way that would help her to build a more sustainable business. That's what I'm hearing. Is that
For
accurate?
sure, for sure.
Awesome. I love that. Okay, what else do you have?
Yeah, and so that kind of goes into our next point is that people don't delegate the right things. Um, Oftentimes when we think of delegation as a small business, we put ourselves in the position of like, oh, what would a corporation do? Or how can I build my business, right? Like what we just talked about, right? You as the founder have to be doing all of this structure work to develop your processes, develop your brand, develop your why, that sort of thing. And then as an entrepreneur, when you're thinking about building your business, you're like, oh, well, like maybe I need somebody to do ads because I don't have ads running. But if you haven't set up the precedents to do those ads, it's not going to be successful. Whereas in a corporation, or a bigger business, a more established business, because they have all those systems in place, they can go and hire an expert, and the expert can come in and immediately hit the ground running and work. Oftentimes that doesn't work in a small scale like our equestrian businesses because the entrepreneur, like I said earlier, hasn't written down all of those processes or their why or their funnel or their customer avatar. And so there aren't those directions. So what I really recommend as a practical tool, if you are starting to learn how to delegate in your team, or maybe you have 1 to 3 people, um, you have to be starting to delegate things that you're already doing. Don't delegate anything new. Like if you're like, oh, I want to, like I said, develop ads, if I want to make a website, things like that, don't do anything new. Free up time and stuff you already do, right? So say if you ship products, right? Maybe you can get somebody to package the products and ship those orders and fulfill those orders because that's something that you already do. The second thing is it should be an activity where there's no business decisions to be made. What I mean by that is when you ship packages, you have to decide what tape to use and which box size, but it's not, deciding the shipping company, right? And so you want to do processes that are really easy to lay out a checklist that you can get somebody to come in. I don't like saying they're no-brainer work because that's not necessarily true, but things that can be put into processes and that the person can do, if they've had a bad day or they haven't had enough coffee and things won't go awry, right? And this is where people say to me, well, I can't do that. They won't do a good job or that sort of thing. And if you don't want to give up, tacking up your horses or giving the feed or whatever, because that's really important to you, then you have to find time and activities elsewhere. Whether, like I said, whether that's in your household, whether that's doing grocery shopping, whatever it is, you have to find those hours elsewhere to delegate to go so that you can do that investment delegation and spend that time on you and investing in your company. And if you don't pick those right things, things go awry. One example I had was in Amelia's business. Her business is very fast growing, and oftentimes I get delegated to do things or to start projects or to investigate things. And about 2 years ago, I was like, actually, I think it was earlier than that because I'd always kind of been involved in the Google ads. But it really wasn't a big part of Amelia's business. She has a lot more Facebook ads. And I had kind of taken a peek and looked into it. And then about 2 years ago, she's like, I think we need to, how's that going? Do we need to invest more time on that sort of thing? And I was like, I don't really even know the answer. Like, I haven't dug into, are these ads effective? I haven't had the time to do that. And there was a whole bunch of projects at the time that I just couldn't get to, these higher level data driven questions that Amelia had about her business that I couldn't answer because even though I had set up all these processes, I hadn't had time to dive in and look at the data so we could make decisions on, you know, this course is actually the most profitable because these are the clients that stay for 2 years. Or, if we can get people to come in on this video, hey, guess what? That video attracts people who spend 10 times more money, even though they're 10 times fewer people, right? I didn't have the time to dive into that. And so we had a long discussion about what our next hire should be. And we had, should we have someone take over an element of the business like sponsorships? Should we have someone take over corporate partnerships? What should it be? And I said, listen, like, I think we should just hire an admin to help take away some of these tasks that I'm doing that are time consuming. And so she said, yep, you know what? She gave me that space to do that, which was wonderful. She's a lovely person to work with. And we hired a wonderful woman. And within 6 months, she had taken off a huge amount of the repetitive work in the back end that I was doing. I was setting up a lot of the integrations between the different platforms, between like payment processing to the learning platform to the email platform and how they all integrate and things like that. And I still overlook a lot of it and tell her how to set it up and things like that. But she does all of the click here, add this, do this, add this tag, do the testing, making sure it works, which was taking a huge amount of my time. And then all of a sudden I freed up a ton of time. And I was like, fantastic. I can now go in and dive into these questions. And so I went and I came back to Amelia, 6 months after that I had had this woman working with me. And I said, listen, like I took a look into Google Ads. I think we need to spend way more money in Google Ads. They're working really well. But I'm not the person to do that. I said, I know enough to like know it's working and to know what I've set up is working, but I don't know how to really optimize it. And she was fantastic. She said, go find me someone who can do this. And so I went and I interviewed a few agencies and a few individuals, and we connected with a man who's very good at what he does. And he went and he's just flown away. But he also has our brand book. He has our customer voice. He has the knowledge of all the audiences that we use. He uses the ad sets that we've already created for Facebook. And so he has all the resources he needs to be successful. And because it's kind of a two-sided delegation, because I was able to free up that time so I could then figure out what the decision was that we needed to make. Should we invest in Google Ads more or should we not? And then because we had all this infrastructure already created from years previously and continuing to create, Dan, who's a lovely man, is able to really do a fantastic job. Like last month, we had over a 600% ROAS on our Google Ads. And I was like, Dan, I don't know what you're doing, but please keep doing it. um, and
Wow.
so it's amazing. And, but that's a case that if we hadn't, dug deep and found out what worked, or if I had just gone out and tried to find Dan might not be able to do the work he's doing, because a lot of the direction I give him as well is, hey, I know this course is working well. I can see in the data that these people are the people that we want to target. And then he's able to go set up Google Ads specifically to do those tasks and actions. So he's still getting a lot of direction from the chain of command, from Amelia to me to him. And so it's not like he is the expert in what he does, but he's still following the whole process and the whole mission of the business. And without having this other woman that helps me, Neve, she's lovely, I wouldn't be able to have the brain power to do the stuff I need to do for Dan. And that's a great example of how delegating in the right order and with the right people makes the most sense.
Right order, right people. I'm writing that one down. Right order, right people. That's so good. Okay. I have a thought, but I'm gonna save it. What else do you have for us,
Oh,
Nicole? Come
yeah.
on, say it.
So building on the right people. Like I said earlier, sometimes equestrian entrepreneurs, they might mishire somebody or maybe have an experience that's not too pleasant. Um, and and it's unfortunate. It happens in any industry where somebody might not be as trustworthy or as honest as they could be. But when I talk about hiring the right people, I mean playing to people's strengths and not putting square pegs into round holes or round pegs into square holes or whatever that analogy is. Oftentimes I see when people are starting to delegate and starting to have their first hire, they try and do a one-person catch-all. And that doesn't often work, especially when we're trying to delegate the tasks that are the repetitive tasks with no business influence, right? No business decisions. Because the person who's really good with the horses might not be really good at cleaning up the tack room that you need, right? And so instead of having one groom to do everything until they work 8 hours a day, maybe you're better off to have two grooms, one who's better with the horses and can handle the young horses, and then another person who's better at the cleaning because they're a little bit older and more mature. I don't know if you found this, but sometimes I find that the older, more mature ladies are much better at cleaning because they've actually kept their own house rather than an 18-year-old. And that's just playing to people's strengths. And when you get into a situation where you might not have the right person, you have to make the decision, do I either keep this person on and amend what we're doing with them so that it is successful and then bringing someone else on to do what's lacking? Or do we let them go because they're not the right fit? And the interview process is really critical for that. And also giving yourself space to make mistakes. I'm going to say this now. You are going to hire the wrong person. It is going to happen in your life. If you don't do it, it will be coming up, like I promise you. But that's part of business. And as you start to grow your team and figure out what works with you, you'll start to know the questions that will help you identify what's going to be well for you. And I also like when I hire, I don't, unless it's somebody specialized like Dan for the ads, I try and keep lots of the hires very general because I like to see what people come in with, and I also like to see what they grow into. Um, for example, we have our girl who's doing social media. Like I said earlier, she's really good at graphic design. And so we fostered that in with her. And now she does a lot more of the graphic design. We didn't hire her as a graphic designer, but it's a role that she's grown into. And you have to sometimes, like I said, bite the bullet, admit you made a mistake. This isn't the right fit, and tweak it and adjust it. And like I said, it's better to have 2 or 3 people with fewer hours than to have one person with more hours and isn't doing each of the jobs to the most efficient sense.
Okay. I almost want to have you repeat that last line because I think that that's going to be a big aha moment for a lot of people because 100% that idea of hiring one person because hiring process is overwhelming becomes let me just hire one person and see how many things they can do well. And it's not, frankly, it's not fair most of the time, right? It's not fair to the person that you're hiring.
No,
So I think it's so important for people to hear it's okay to hire 2 or 3 people and give them very specific jobs that they're good at. It may be, and it likely will be, more effort and time and energy for you in the beginning of that process. That does mean potentially more interviews. It does mean more people to onboard, which goes back to your original, like have your preparation there. But the long-term benefit of that and just frankly, the enjoyment that they will have working with you and for you will be increased, which also is going to increase the outcome.
for sure. And like, I hate putting it down to money, but it's also, it will save you money in the long run because you'll get the jobs done more efficiently and you'll be able to put that back into your business. And like you said, the customers and the team will be better. And oftentimes, like I said, the roles grow and change and become more as you develop a relationship with these people and you understand what they're good at. And the other thing that I find is a lot of people, especially in the equestrian world, they don't want a full-time job. They don't want to work for 8 hours. They want, either to do 2 hours after work or to work Saturdays. They don't necessarily want to do 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, which is totally fine because they're working it in with whatever their job is, or maybe they're a mom, or maybe they're starting out their business. It gives them the financial flexibility to say, hey, I'm going to try starting my own riding school. But if I do these 10 hours a week for Amelia, at least then I can, pay my bills and,
Right.
have a little bit of money coming in. So I'm not completely in a deficit. And so yeah, I guess another way of saying is you don't have to do that full one hire because a lot of people don't want that and you don't need
Hmm.
to do it to make it effective for your business.
Yeah, so true. Okay. That's so
Yeah.
good, Nicole, on hiring the right people. And is there anything else? I jumped in on that. So if you have
Yes.
more, bring it.
I have 2 more tips.
Okay.
Um, the fourth one is a very practical one, and this one takes practice. And I really recommend getting a system in place, whether it's a whiteboard, whether it's an online tool, but you have to be accountable. And that's both for you and for anyone you're delegating to. And oftentimes, and I sometimes am, I fall into this trap too. I ask somebody to do something and I don't give them the parameters needed to complete the job. So if I'll say, hey, can you send me that document that I need? But I don't tell them that I need it in 2 hours because I've got a meeting that I'm going into. And then in 2 hours, I'm like, where is it? And then you're frustrated. That's a very basic example. But essentially, when you're assigning a role, you want it written down somewhere, whether it's electronically or on the board in the barn, wherever you want it. You need to have the task, like a title for the task and a description. You need to have who is responsible for completing that task and then the due date they need it by. At minimum, those three things. The task, who's responsible for it, and the due date. Sometimes you add in the due date time if it's time related. building on that, you want to have, if it needs to be reviewed by anybody before it goes out, like if it's a social media post, if it's a press release, does it have to be reviewed by you or someone on your team before it goes out? Is that person waiting for anything? Maybe the reason why you haven't been sent that press release to be sent to be reviewed because it's supposed to go out tomorrow, maybe you haven't been sent it yet because the person who's supposed to be doing it is still waiting on photos from someone else on your team, right? So is there anything else that needs to be provided before the task can be completed? And then you want to also assign a priority. Is this something that is timely and needs to get done this week? Or is this something that we're working towards? And if you have to push it to next week, that is okay. And I find that gives the team a lot of anonymity and control over themselves. And it alleviates a lot of stress, especially in a remote environment when I don't see these women in the office. I don't know if they're flustered, if they're feeling stressed. I'm very adamant that they try and communicate to me, but it's still, people are all different, especially when you're onboarding someone, they don't want to say no to you. And so I like to tell people like, hey, this is a secondary item for the week. If you get to it, awesome. If you don't, we'll do it next week. Don't panic. And that gives people this sense of, I'm being taken care of as well. And while still holding them accountable, like you still have to do it next week, but it gives them that sense of breathing room. And if you don't do those things, if you don't, especially those three top ones, you're never going to be successful because all of a sudden you're not going to realize it's been a month and you haven't released that press release that you wanted. Or maybe so-and-so thought they were supposed to be doing it, but actually the other person was supposed to, right? And when you have that deadline come up, you can see it. And having weekly meetings, Amelia is very adamant, and she's had that instilled beforehand. We have every Wednesday, we have a weekly team meeting. Everyone comes in. I take notes as we go. As things come up, I assign them to people and I assign a due date. And the due date is always before the next Wednesday meeting. If it's a bigger project, it'll usually be like map this out or have a meeting about this, so that at least we're making progress on it. And then what happens is the whole team knows next Wednesday, we're going to do a check-in on all these items. And if they don't have it done, they're going to be put in the hot seat, or they need to realize what's going on here, or they need to reach out for help. And so it's regular, and it's not like it's calling them out. It's structured and formulated. And when you have that, it gives that system and that regularity. And my Tuesdays is my meeting day. I meet with the whole team. I do a 20-minute meeting call with everybody. Sometimes it's a little longer. And then on my Mondays, that's when Amelia and I meet. That's usually much longer for 20 minutes than 20 minutes. But it's a way to keep us all accountable and to working on things and going forward, because so often we get stuck, like I said, in the day-to-day urgent but not important things, when really we should be doing the important but not urgent things. And having that structure and that weekly check-in is really helpful. You can do daily. I find it's not necessary usually. And then usually 2 or 3 weeks is too long because people forget and they don't plan their time out correctly and things like that. Weekly is ideal.
Okay. All right. Thank you. The practicality of that is so brilliant, Nicole. I appreciate that because, again, we have different flavors of every entrepreneur, right? So we have some entrepreneurs that are like super structured and love a list, and some entrepreneurs who are like, I fly by the seat of my pants. Well, that's okay until you hire team members, and then that's just not a fun person to work for. Let's be honest. You don't need to be perfect, but you can look for some specific ways to put in some structures and systems so that you're more successful, your business is more successful, and the people you hire are more successful. So I love that piece. All right, what's your last one?
Yeah, and this one goes right into that practical piece. Standard operating procedure documents are the holy grail of everything. And for those of your listeners who might not know, a standard operating procedure document is a very sophisticated checklist or order of directions. But it's a bit more sophisticated because it usually has pictures and descriptions and links. And the idea is that you don't need necessarily any training to do the task. If you have the SOP, you can run through it. And especially for an online business or a business with a lot of part-time people, having the SOPs and the systems in place makes everything work smoothly. Because otherwise things get disorganized. Everyone does it their own little way, and then files get lost. Or maybe, say if I've got someone covering a holiday weekend, and they've come across a problem with a customer who's upset because there's an extra charge and they don't know how to do the refund. Instead of reaching out to me on the holiday weekend or interrupting other team members and being like, how do I fix this? they can go open the SOP document, run through it because they haven't done it in 2 months and go, oh, this is what I need to do here, da, 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 da. And it's hard sometimes for equestrian entrepreneurs to be like, well, why do I need that? I don't have much going on, that sort of stuff. But SOPs are also about keeping people safe and having your processes in place so you have key examples to show employees, if you don't do it this way, this is going to happen like this. Or, hey, you haven't done this correctly for the last 3 times, and it's creating more work for the team. If this happens, you need to follow the SOP. Please review it. If you don't, we're going to have to make changes. And it sets the expectation of what is required. And you're probably also doing a lot of SOPs in general that you don't realize. I think pony clubbers are really good at SOPs. You think every single one of those kids knows how to put on a blanket and take it off correctly. That is an SOP. Undo the back leg straps first, then do the belly straps, then do the front, then pull it off. That order of go is an SOP, and it keeps you safe. And so it can also help you if you've got people who get injured on the job and things like that. You're a little bit covered in that sense. And it happened to us this a couple of months ago, actually. We do these great calls in Amelia's programs. We call them office hours or video review calls, where her or I or another coach comes on like Zoom call like this, and then we pull up student videos. The students are all on the Zoom call, and they tell us what they're working on. We look at their video, we give them feedback, we give them homework, that sort of thing. And there's a secretary on the call, and the secretary's job is to take notes of what we're talking about, to link out any videos that we maybe have referenced, and they have to put on this screen before the call like, hey, we're about to get started. Can't wait for office hours. Here's what you can do. Introduce yourself in the chat, sort of thing. And there's a process for that, and there's all the instructions on how to do it. And at the beginning of this year, we implemented that screen at the beginning that says, hey, welcome to office hours. We didn't used to have that. It used to just be like an empty Zoom room, which isn't the greatest user experience. If you're like a new student, you come in, you're like, we're all just sitting here quietly for 10 minutes before we start. Like, it's not a great feeling. So we said, hey, let's make this graphic. Let's put it up, tell people how the process is going to work. Let's tell them to introduce themselves so they have something to do while they wait for this call to start. Chaos ensued. Every single Zoom user, like Zoom secretary, was struggling to get this document up, this image up, because Zoom you can either launch it from your browser, you can launch it from, there's a different browser view, and then there's also like the Zoom app. And so when you do it in different ways, the platform is different. And then if you share it, then their host can't share. And then if you allow multiple screen share, then you can't optimize the video, and then the video is glitchy, and then people can't see the video. It's huge mayhem. And for about 4 calls, I was like, what is going on? Like, we sent a voice note, like, why isn't this working? 1 out of the 5 secretaries could do it. And I said, hey, listen, go into the SOP where it talks about all the responsibilities, how to process the video afterwards. Add a section in the beginning about how to put this image up and what things to check off. She goes, okay. And then I sent it to all of the secretaries. I said, hey, before your next office hours, please review the SOP document. I think it will help you. No problem after that. It solved the whole thing. And now what's great is that if it happens again, they have a document to go back and be like, hey, how do I fix this in the moment? Because it's very stressful when you've got 30, 40, 50 people on the call and it's not working, and you've got the coach there trying to like talk while you fix it in the back end. And having those SOPs in place allows you to scale your business and allows you to train people effectively and quickly. You think of McDonald's. It's a massive corporation run by teenagers. They are the most disorganized people in the world and sometimes very irresponsible. And they run McDonald's easy peasy. Like, when have you gone to McDonald's and it's been crowded or things going awry? They are so good. And it's because of these standard operating procedures that are put in place. So after you've started to delegate things and after you've started to get a bit of a flow with 1 or 2 people that work really well, start to implement these things. Because then as people go on mat leave, as people grow and change, they go off to school or whatever it is, you now have this set of instruction manuals that is growing and changing as your business is. And it's really standard. So that way, when you have burnout delegation or things that you just need to get off your plate, they can do it because they have this document and documents to help them.
That's so good. I so appreciate that. And as you're talking, I'm just thinking, my heart on this podcast and in everything I do is to help people build a sustainable equine business, right? So something they can do for the long term. It's not just the shot in the arm it's really sustainable. And so I love this idea of getting people the idea of saying, hey, this is important because it's going to help you build a long-term business, right? You're going to do this. And then as you train people, it's going to give you freedom. And then it's going to help people to be able to help you so you can do more of the things that you love to do. Like there's so many benefits to it. But as people are listening, I know there's so many objections. I can already hear them, right? I can hear the time factor. So I have one last question for you before I ask you the more broad question. And that is just this idea of time. And I know that you're not Amelia, but you work directly with her and you know a lot about her schedule. So for people that are thinking, how the heck is she doing that? What are her secrets, or how is that actually even possible? Because it just seems like it's not possible because of the scale. I mean, even going back to like 4 years ago when she hired you as a project manager, what did her team look like?
Yeah, so when she hired me, it was her. She worked full time in her like training business, and she was doing this as well full time. And then her mom helped her, Joellen, wonderful woman, and still does, helped her in the Facebook groups and manage some of the calls and things like that. And then she had a admin that did like a little bit of emails, like maybe 2 hours a week, not very much. And then she had someone that posted on social media for her.
Okay.
But she created all the content, all the video editing, everything was her. And I know, and I work on it too, but she works exceptionally hard. And she's not, it's not something she set up and now it's running. She works probably 80 hours a week, but she does it in a smart way. Like I said, it's that investment delegation. She's finding the tasks that are repetitive and that she doesn't need to do. And she's finding time where there isn't time. She listens to her podcasts in the car. She delegated a lot of the customer service work, which I know filled her cup so much. That was really hard for her to delegate. But, because she freed up, answering emails for 10 hours a week, she was able to create a whole bunch of new courses in the last 2 years, which has filled our cup up more, right? And so I think the biggest misconception people have about her and about other equestrian entrepreneurs is that she does have a team behind her. We do work exceptionally hard to build her up and to do and free up her time to do the things that she wants to do. It's not just her, but she isn't just taking that time and going on the beach and riding more horses and doing whatever. She is working her butt off, and it's kind of funny. Sometimes we'll be over at her house and I'll be doing something, and we'll be waiting for a meeting, and then after the meeting we'll have dinner, and then we'll be sitting on the couch and her husband and I will be watching TV, and I glance over and she's like typing away on her laptop and I'm like, stop it, you're supposed to be relaxing. And she's like, I just want to finish a few more things. Like, she works exceptionally hard, and the business works because she works. um and finding finding people you can trust is really important, and finding systems so that you can routinely get into that. I know she's made a lot of sacrifices. She doesn't take on as many training clients anymore. She had to give up tacking up her own horses. That was a really big one for her. She really loved being able to spend that time with them and tack them up. She still does it on Sundays because that's what fills her cup. But, she was able then to, she's able to have, probably about 2 hours more a day not tacking up horses. And so things like that. And sometimes it takes sitting down with your team and sitting and also recording for I know, was it last year or the year before, her and I did, it's called a star chart. And basically you do it for your management team. You do 1 star for each person, and you write down the 5 things that you do the most and take up like your responsibilities. And then you tell on the chart, you say how much time each week you do. And so you usually have 2 or 3 weeks to do it, 2 or 3 weeks to do it. So you can kind of say like, oh, I've actually spent 10 hours doing this, not 5 hours or whatever. And then you look at it and you go, okay, well, how many hours do I need to do whatever this business development is, whether it's setting up the new website, whether it's creating a new course, how many hours am I going to need to do that? And then you look at what you're doing and you say, okay, what can I delegate or give up? And you have to find that time. It's literally a map of you going, okay, well, if I push this off to somebody else, then that gives me 4 more hours to do this.
Yeah.
And like I said, sometimes it's looking outside of your business to the 10 hours that you're not at the barn and going, okay, well, if I meal prep on Sundays, because that's the other thing too, you can delegate to yourself in your personal time, right? If you meal prep on Sundays for 2 hours and it saves you an hour each night cooking dinner, you've just made 3 hours there, right? Because you would have been spending 5 hours and, the math works out. But I think that, it's not this magic fix. Delegation isn't just about giving it away and then you get more free time. Like I said, it's investment delegation. It's putting back into your business. And that's what Amelia does really well. And why her business works is because she's found the time how to delegate those things. And then she can go do these bigger things. And I know, because sometimes, like you said, seems impossible that she does it all. But she does. And some weeks are definitely easier than others. And some weeks she works more than others. But she's got a really good team behind her. And I'm happy to be a part of it. It's great to be around.
I love that. Well, and I think that what I want to end with is everyone remembering what I've talked about often, which is this idea that success is so subjective. So we are not picturing this idea of, hey, this is what Amelia Newcomb does in her program, and this is the ideal of success. And if you're not doing what Amelia does, that's not success. 100%, that's not the heart of this conversation. It's look how somebody who has found what their version of success is, how they have learned to do it, how they have learned to manage their time, learned to delegate, and are continuing to refine what that looks like. Because pre-COVID, I'm guessing she didn't have this picture in her mind of this is what her business would look at. And so for those listening, I want you to remember that my heart is for you to have a successful equestrian business to your version of success, your personal definition of success. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling the time crunch, I want you to consider delegation. And I want you to consider the things that Nicole is telling you. And let me also just say, from a personal perspective, sometimes having an SOP is just something you need to do for yourself if you're a team of one or,
Yes.
or a virtual assistant even. But even if you're a team of one, if you will put some processes in place, then you will also create some time for yourself to be able to enjoy your business more. So even if you're saying, Denise, I'm not quite ready to hire somebody, I want you to consider putting some SOPs in place to help yourself run a smoother business. It will help you. So thank you so much, Nicole. You have shared so many great nuggets, but also practical strategies that go deeper than just tips and nuggets. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I would love for those listening to be able to connect with you. I will, of course, link to all of Amelia's things so people can go and learn about their business. But if it's all right, I'm going to link to you on Instagram on the show notes as well, so people can find you. Is there somewhere else you'd like me to send them, or is Instagram, LinkedIn? Where do you want people to connect with you if they want to?
Yeah, for sure. You can also check out my website, www.beyondthehaybale.com. It's kind of funny. I joked I ran my business for so long without a website, even though I'm a digital strategist and I help people with their businesses. And I'm like, oh, I should probably launch one of those. So it's a very rudimentary site, but you can find me there. And then you can also reach out to Amelia. She will always put me in contact with people. She's really good about that sort of thing and supporting the whole team and all of our endeavors.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay, friends, I hope that was so helpful to you. I know that if you are in a place where you're looking to delegate or you have a team and you've been struggling with that process, then what Nicole shared here today will help you. But here's my encouragement to you. In episodes or conversations like this, it can be so easy to have that overwhelmed feeling because very likely you learned a lot and there are a lot of actions that you could take. And so we get what? Paralysis by analysis. Where do I go first? And so I want to remove that for you. And I want to remind you what we talked about in the very beginning of the episode, which is having that clearly defined version of success, what that looks like for you. And so if you don't have that, first, I want you to go get my free guide to setting goals that are going to keep you connected in your daily items to what you're doing long term. So go get my free goals guide at stormlily.com/goals. I want that to be your first step because from there, when you have that laid out, then you can dive in and say, okay, what is the first thing I need to do to help me get there? The first thing, that's all you need to decide. Your first step. Okay. So I want you to get your goals guide, or if you already have goals, if you already have a vision for your business, revisit that and then decide from what I learned from Nicole today, what is the first thing I need to do? Maybe you need to start putting in place some standard operating procedures. Maybe you need to put together a job description for your hires, the new hires you're going to make, or maybe it's the people you have on your team now that don't have clarity on what they're doing. Can you put together that job description? Maybe you need to look at the different kinds of delegation and decide what's the one that you need to focus on. How can you do that investment delegation that Nicole was talking about so that you can delegate tasks that free you up to do the things that are really building your business and building your team up and investing in the areas that are really going to help your business the most. So first, get your goals and your vision in place. Then I want you to look at this and pick one thing that you're going to do and that you're going to take action on based on what you learned today. Because the magic does not come in listening to episodes, it comes in taking action. So next, what I want you to do is send me a message, tag me on social media, send me an email, denise@stormlily.com, and let me know the action that you are going to take. What often happens in entrepreneurship is you are operating in a silo. And so I want to remove that barrier for you. So let me be a part of your team that's cheering you on in your business. So send me a message and tell me what action you're taking and how that's going to move you closer to that long-term goal. And then if you're feeling so inspired, share that with me. I'd love to hear what your long-term goals are for your business. All right, friends, make sure also, one last note, that you go to the show notes because my conversation with Nicole is highlighted there. If you're thinking there's something that you missed, or if you want a link to the goals guide, if you want anything related to what you heard about today on the episode, you will find that all on the show notes. So if you go to stormlily.com/170 for episode 170, you can get those highlights of the conversation and everything else right there on the website. All right. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Please share this with a friend. If this was helpful to you, I'm sure it will be helpful to them. Wherever you're listening, go leave a review. I'd be so grateful. And I know that's an extra ask, but let me just tell you, by leaving a review, you are helping wherever it is that you are, wherever it is that you're listening, you're helping that app to know that people are finding value in this podcast, and then they will show it to more people so that more equestrian entrepreneurs can do more of what they love to do. So thanks again for being here. Continue to stay tuned. I've got some great episodes lined up for you in the next coming weeks, and have an amazing day.